Good morning, guys. It's Jessie again with FoodNet Meals on Wheels. I'm back for another edition of our cooking demonstrations, and today we're going to be making a healthy carrot muffin recipe that has raisins and walnuts if you'd like to add them. But you don't have to add the walnuts if you don't like nuts or if you don't have them in the house. So we're going to start by preheating the oven to 425 degrees, which I already have going just because it usually takes a little longer to preheat than it does to make this recipe. And this recipe is great. It's super fast to make. It takes about 15 minutes to prepare and then 13 minutes in the oven. So you could do this in the morning and then you'll have 12 muffins to last you throughout the week. And they make great snacks and they also make great breakfasts. So there's a pretty good amount of fiber from the whole wheat flour that you'll use. And then they also have carrots in them that gives you a bunch of vitamins and it sustains you through the day. So I'm going to start by getting out the carrots and I'll show you what those look like. So I've already grated my carrots and the recipe calls for 2 cups of peeled and grated carrots, which is the equivalent of about 3 large carrots or 6 small or medium carrots. So make sure that you peel the carrots so you get any of the dirt off of the skin and then chop off the top and then you can peel them. I used a cheese grater, the bigger edge of the cheese grater, and then you can also use a food processor if you have one, but either way works well. So I have my carrots right here. We're going to start by greasing a muffin tin. So if you have a non-stick pan, you can use that and you don't have to grease it. But if it's not a non-stick pan, you'll want to grease it. So you can either take some butter and rub it in the different muffin holes, or you can do a little squirt of a non-stick spray. And that way they'll come out easier and won't stick. All right, so the oven's preheated. We've sprayed our pan. And now we're gonna mix some dry ingredients together. So first we're gonna start with the flour. You can use any kind of flour. I like the white whole wheat flour, so it's kind of a blend of both white and wheat. But the whole wheat flour is also really great, and it's higher in fiber and a whole grain. So that's a great alternative as well. So the recipe calls for 1 3/4 cups of flour. So that was 1 cup. And then we're going to do 3/4 size cups of flour. So 1, 2. Looks like I'll just have enough. And 3. All right. So we'll put that in a large mixing bowl, and then we're going to blend it with the baking powder. So you're going to need half of a teaspoon of baking powder. So here's my half teaspoon, and then dump it in. And then you'll add half of a teaspoon of baking soda, which is a little different than baking powder. So you can't use them interchangeably. They do have different properties when they cook. So there's my baking soda. And then you're gonna need a half of a teaspoon of salt. There we are. And so the recipe actually calls for 1.5 teaspoons of baking powder. So I'm gonna also add another teaspoon. And the baking powder is what gives the muffins a little bit of a rise when they cook in the oven. So you want to make sure you add that. All right, so we're just gonna mix these together so they're incorporated. And then we can set that aside and we're ready to go. So now you're going to take your grated carrots, and this is where you would add chopped walnuts if you'd like. but I'm not going to add chopped walnuts because I don't like walnuts, but they are, give it a great texture if you want something a little crunchy. But I do like raisins, so I'm going to add the ½ cup of raisins that the recipe calls for. And raisins do tend to stick together, so it might take a little bit if you're using a bigger box to get them out. All right. Raisins. And we're going to add these into the dry ingredients. So you can just dump it right in. All right. And now we're going to add all of the wet ingredients together. So you're going to want to take your oil, which you can use olive oil or canola oil. Either will work. Whatever you have in the house and is easiest works. So we're going to use ½ cup. And then we're going to use a ½ cup or a cup of plain yogurt. So I like to use plain non-fat Greek yogurt. You can use regular yogurt. It'll just cook a little bit differently. So just be aware of that. And then you're going to use 2 eggs. It's best if they're at room temperature, just so the temperature change doesn't make them coagulate with the oil. So there's 1 egg and 2 eggs. And whenever you're using raw egg, it's really important to make sure you clean up your working space after, just because the egg is often can carry bacteria that you don't want to contaminate your food later when you go to cook on the same surface. So I'm just going to wash my hands. I'll be right back. All right. And then our sweetener for this recipe is a maple syrup. You can also use honey if you don't have maple syrup, but I'm a Vermont girl, so I have home produced maple syrup back from Vermont. So I'm going to go ahead and use that, but honey would also be a great choice as well. So we're using ½ cup of the syrup or honey, whichever you prefer. Mix it right in. All right. And then we're going to whisk these together to combine them. So you want to make sure that the egg is incorporated into the oil and that the yogurt isn't clumpy. And if you have an electric blender, you can also use that to mix this, but it's easy enough to do it by hand. And if you don't have a whisk, you could also use a fork. Right. Perfect. So then we're also going to use some cinnamon, and I have a mix of cinnamon and nutmeg, but if you don't like nutmeg, you can just do cinnamon, really whatever works for you. And sometimes ground ginger is also nice if you like ginger. So we're going to do 2 teaspoons of this. And of course, if you really like cinnamon, feel free to add extra. All right. And then we're going to mix our dry ingredients together again, just to break up the ground carrots. And that way all the cinnamon gets mixed in as well. Oh, great. So it's looking pretty well incorporated. So now I'm gonna combine the wet ingredients with the dry ingredients. So you can just use your whisk to get all of the extras. Okay. And then again, you're just gonna mix using the spoon to incorporate. And we used the Greek yogurt in this recipe, again, in place of butter. So it's a great protein source and also has no fat if you get the fat-free version. So it's quite a bit healthier. But it also just tastes better and has protein, and I prefer it to butter. All right, and make sure you scrape the bottom and get all of that flour that's in the bottom. Perfect. So it looks really well combined. You can see it's nice orange color, and it smells great from the cinnamon. So the next thing we're gonna do is take a spoon and we're gonna grab our muffin tin and evenly distribute the batter between the different muffins. So make sure you have about 12. And they don't have to be perfectly even, just whatever works. And the oven looks like it's just about preheated, so perfect timing. All right, just 2 more. And there we are. All right, so I'm gonna stick these in the oven. They bake for about 13 minutes. Depending on your oven though, it might take a little longer or less time. The best way to tell if they're cooked is if they look a little golden brown on the top, and then you can take a toothpick and stick it into the middle of the oven, and if it, or the middle of the muffin. And if it pulls out clean and doesn't have goo around it, it's a good indication that your muffins are cooked all the way. But if it comes out a little wet and kind of sticks to the toothpick, you'll want to leave it in the oven for just a couple more minutes. So that's all for today. Leave some comments below if you like the recipe. And then, of course, we are taking requests. So if you have any ideas of recipes you'd like to see, just put them on our Facebook page or drop them in the comment below. Have a great day, guys. I hope you enjoy the recipe.